Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Irma from Performing Arts Forum. It's brilliant to see so many of you here this morning. The idea for this session came really out of our festivals working group because we were having lots of conversations about ticketing and different things. And then I ended up speaking to Katie about this, and we felt that it was a really good opportunity to do a sort of a GDPR 101 update for everyone. So I'm delighted that Katie's agreed to do this, and we're going to have some help from TicketSolve as well this morning. We're also going to have lots of opportunities at the end for your questions. But if anything strikes you as we're going along, pop it into the chat as well. And for now, I'm really delighted to hand over to Katie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Baines. I'm CEO of Indigo Limited. We've been working with Theatre Forum for a few years now. We started working with them during COVID, so some of you may have come across us then. But it's great to be here today to talk about, it's not really GDPR, it's about increasing data for marketing, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a minute. It's an important caveat at the start is that I'm not a lawyer, so please do not use my advice as legal advice because it's not. But having said that, I've done an awful lot of work with arts organisations on this matter and have consulted various lawyers in various different guises. So hopefully we can be confident that what I'm telling you isn't complete rubbish, and that we have some venues who've also implemented a lot of what we're going to show you today, and they've had great success in doing it. So I think that's all my disclaimers at the start. So I'm going to share my screen and bombard you with slides, but there will be a copy of these available if anybody wants them from Performing Arts Forum. So don't feel you have to take screenshots of everything. If, as I'm going through, something isn't clear or you really don't understand, please put it in the chat and Irma will stop me and I'll try and make that a bit clearer for you. If you've got questions, particularly around how to implement it and stuff like that, maybe write them down or pop them in the chat, but we'll leave those till the end because it might be that those questions are answered as we go through. But please do keep the questions coming because that's how this is going to work best. Right, so I will try and share my screen and see if that works. And then I will put the slideshow on. Right, is that doing what it should be? Great. Okay, so those of you who have been to some of these things before may remember that when Heather Maitland does her sort of deep data dive into your data, this is something that she often recommends that you do and you pull out of your box office system if you have one. It's basically, if you look at all the people on your database, how many of them have booked a ticket? How many of those have paid for a ticket? Because they might be comps. How many of those can you actually talk to? And typically, when we've looked at people's databases, that percentage that you can talk to, the number you can talk to, is typically less than 4 out of 10. So if you imagine when you're taking bookings for an event, you're generally taking, in most cases, you're taking people's names and addresses because they're buying by credit card. Now, obviously, there's some walk-ups that you might not have, but mostly you're taking people's names and addresses, particularly if they're booking online. And then only about 4 out of 10 of those has the average organisation got permission to talk to in terms of future marketing. So you've done all the hard work in getting those people to come to a show, getting them to come for the first time, and then you can't tell them about anything else you're doing. And that is a real problem. The good news is that when we did our audience insights presentation at the gathering a couple of weeks ago, we were able to report that overall in the cohort of data that we had, this marketing permissions percentage has gone up nearly 20%. So in 2024. So the organisations that took part in that, a lot of them have increased the percentage of people that they can talk to. So how have they done that? And one of the main reasons, one of the main ways in which they've done that is changing the way that they capture marketing permissions for their audiences. And I'm going to talk you through. I know you're probably going, oh my God, this is GDPR. It's not going to be very interesting. I promise you, it is going to be worth it. What we're going to cover, we're going to talk about, or don't switch off, the legal bases for collecting and processing data for marketing. That's what they call them in the GDPR. which legal basis to use for what. So, in other words, how do you make sure that you're operating legally? How to ask people the right questions to maximize those percentage permissions. And we're going to talk about that, how you do that online, by phone, and in person. And then what you can do with the data that you've collected and who you can share it with. So, if you are a festival, for example, who sells your tickets through a venue box office, we're going to cover that off. Okay, if you're a festival that has your own box office, we're going to cover that off too. If you're a venue, we're going to cover that off. So, hopefully, we've got all this covered. So, how can we gather more permissions from people legally? Because if we have more people that we can talk to, we have more chance of getting people back. And again, one of the things we found at the gathering when we showed the audience insights thing is that where organisations have increased the percentage permissions, they're also increasing repeat attendance and reducing the percentage of audiences that only come once a year. And it's not rocket science. And this is one of the main drivers for that. So, how can we do it? Well, at the moment, most of you are asking people to opt in to receive marketing communications. And what happens, particularly online, is ticket buyers are busy just trying to buy the ticket and they're trying to get to the end as quickly as possible. So if you're interrupting them with a box that says, "Oh, would you like to hear from us?" and they actually have to do something, they're just going to skip past it if that's an option. How could we make them agreeing to hear from you easier and make it the path of least resistance? So, if that's the easiest thing to do to get to the end of the transaction, they are more likely to do it. So, that's what we're trying to do. So, in terms of processing data legally, you can read all the legalese on the Commissioner's website, and I'll put a link into that as well so that you can read it. But if you follow these 3 steps, you won't go far wrong. So, firstly, you need to be clear with people what you're going to do with their data. So, when you go, when you buy something online, if somebody wants to then send you more things about their products, they need to tell you that's what they're going to do. Otherwise, you'd be a bit annoyed because you'd be like, "Oh, I didn't agree to that." So you need to be clear with people at the point that you're capturing their data about what you're going to do with it. The second thing is you then need to do what you've said you're going to do and not do something else. So, in other words, if you've said, "We're going to use this data for sending you information about our future shows," you can't then use that data for something else. Okay, so you need to do what you said you're going to do with it. And so you need to make sure that when you're telling them what you're going to do with it, it includes everything you're going to do. And then the third principle is stop using their data when they stop engaging with you. And we'll talk about what we mean by stop engaging with you, or when they ask you to. So if somebody says, "Please stop sending me marketing emails," you have to do that. Okay, that is a legal requirement. So those are the 3 steps really. Be clear what you're going to do, only do what you've said you're going to do, and stop doing it when you don't need to do it anymore or when somebody asks you to stop. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. So here's the legally bit, and I promise there isn't too much of this. You can only process data, personal data. So by personal data, we mean data that's personally identifiable with a legal basis. And this comes from the EU GDPR. This isn't the UK GDPR, this is the EU GDPR, so you're fine. And there are 6 ways in which you can process data, and they're written down here. But we only really need to worry about 3 of them. The Oh no, why have I done those? No, yes, we only need to worry about 3 of them. The 3 in dark blue are the ones you don't really need to worry about. The 3 that we're likely to use are consent. So somebody asks you to do something or agrees that you can do it. The second one is performance of a contract, where you need to be able to process the data in order to fulfill the contract you have with the customer. And the last one is necessary for the purposes of something called legitimate interests. And I'm going to explain what those are. I've also put a little asterisk at the bottom. There's also something called, I can't remember what this stands for, but it's privacy and electronic communications requirements, I think is what it is. There are also some very specific rules around what you're allowed to do with electronic communications, which in our case is largely going to be email. Okay, so we'll cover that off as well. Um, for the purposes of today, I am going to focus mostly on talking to audiences about buying more tickets because that is the lowest hanging fruit. This is what we can really do something about. There are all sorts of other things that if you were thinking about GDPR in the widest sense for your organisation, that you should also think about because it covers processing of personal data for your employees, your suppliers, artists that you work with, freelancers, educational community programs. I'm not going to cover any of that today, but just to say, that there's a lot that you need to be aware of as well. But for now, we're going to just focus today on audiences. We're also going to come back to this one around performance of a contract a bit later because this is going to be really important when we start to talk about if you're a festival and you're selling your tickets through a venue, because it all comes back to who the customer has the contract with in terms of their ticket. So we will come back to that later, and that's going to be quite important. Oh, and on that slide there is the link, which when we send these slides out, you will have to the Commissioner website that gives you all of this legal information if you need it. So knock yourselves out with that. Okay, so the first legal basis that I'm going to talk about is consent. So you need to use one of those six. In our case, we've just got three that we're looking at in order to process data. So one way of doing that is to use consent. And what the GDPR regulation says is if you're using consent, it must be granular for each specific processing operation. So you need consent to do this with the data, and then you need another consent to do something else with the data, and they have to be very specific. So let me show you what I mean by that. It also needs to be unambiguous and involve clear affirmative action. So if you are using consent as the basis for capturing marketing permissions, you can't pre-tick a box. The person has to tick that box. And you have to keep clear records to demonstrate consent. So if the commissioner came along and said to you, how do you know that person has given consent to receive that email or to do that? You need to be able to show that. And people must be able to easily withdraw consent, having given it, and you need to record that as well. Okay, so if you're using consent at the moment, this is a bit of a nightmare because you have to ask them lots of different questions to get the granularity. They need to tick a box. They need to be able to untick that box or tell you however they like that they don't want to do it anymore. And you have to record all of that in your records. Here's some examples with some random boxes that have appeared on the screen. So if you would like to join our email list to hear about our shows, please tick this box. If you would like to hear from us by post to hear about our shows, tick this box. If you'd like to hear by email about opportunities to support our work, so fundraising, you tick this box. And then perhaps you'd like to hear about that by post. So hopefully you can see this is all a bit of a nightmare. And if you're using consent, this is really how you should be doing it because that's what the law says. Okay, hopefully you're getting the gist that I'm not a big fan of consent. And this is why I think you can tie yourselves in knots with it. Okay, then we're going to talk about another legal basis, which is performance of a contract. So you can use this for processing some data. Ticket buyer enters into a contract with somebody, with you if you're a venue, possibly you if you're a festival, when they purchase a ticket. So you'll have terms and conditions, I'm sure, somewhere on your website that will say, these are the terms and conditions about buying a ticket from us. And there is a sort of whether it's actually a written contract or it's terms and conditions or an implied contract, there is a contract there. This contract gives you the right to process their data in order to fulfill that contract. And that means you can contact them by any method they've given you, telephone, email, postal address, in relation to their booking in our case. So their payment, their booking, if there was a change of performer, cancelled performance, anything like that, you don't need permission to talk to them about. Okay. So if you think about when somebody books a ticket, they're probably automatic, if say they've done it online, they probably automatically get a confirmation email which says thanks for booking your tickets. And it might have their tickets attached to it, or maybe you send the tickets later. All of that is permitted under performance of a contract. You don't have to exclude people, and that would be silly, wouldn't it? Because then they wouldn't get their tickets. So of course you're not going to do that. But it's important to understand the difference between the contacting people under performance of a contract, which is about delivering the things you have to deliver to them that they've asked you to do, and what you need other permission to do, like talking to them about future shows. That means that if you're doing pre-show emails to say, here's where to come, here's where to park, you can do all of that to everybody, attach their tickets, but you can't use that to upsell, fundraise, or market because you're sending it to everybody under performance of a contract. So you can't use that email if you're sending that to everybody to say, oh, why not upgrade to our drinks package? Or why not do this? Why not also buy for this show? You can't do that if you're sending it to everyone. You would only be allowed to send that to people who've given you permission to market to them. But interestingly, it does legally include asking their opinion about the show and customer research, because the argument there is you're using the research to determine the extent to which you have successfully delivered that contract, if you like. So if you're using Indigo Share post-show surveys, for example, they can go to everybody who booked for the show. They don't have to just go to people who have opted in to receive marketing stuff. So some examples of performance of a contract. So as I say, an email confirming the ticket transaction, a pre-show email as long as it's just information and not selling anything. It could be an email or a phone call informing people of a cancelled performance, or it could be an SMS if you've got their mobile number. And it can be a tell us what you thought email or survey using something like Indigo Share. It could also be used if you sell a membership scheme where one of the key benefits of that membership is getting priority information. The membership is the contract, so you can send them information, priority information, because that's what they've bought the membership for, right? But obviously, if they then subsequently say, I don't want you to send me that, you have to not send it. Okay. So email marketing then. So here's our options. We've got consent, which is an opt-in, and that requires people to actively tick a box to say they want to receive communications by email. Or you can use something else that's called the soft opt-in or legitimate interest. And this is an opt-out. This allows you to send emails to customers who've bought something and given you the email as part of the transaction. And it has to be about similar goods and services. So they have to be given the option to opt out at that moment and in all subsequent email communications. And you can't share that data with anybody else. So we looked at consent, we've looked at performance of a contract. This is the third one, which is called legitimate business interests. Okay, and under the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation, this says you can email people without them having to actually tick a box. You can have a pre-ticked box using legitimate interest. We couldn't have a pre-ticked box if we were using consent, but we can if we're using this. I'm going to show you some examples of that in a minute. We have found some of the organisations that have switched across to this since we started doing this work have actually doubled the percentage of marketing permissions that they're getting from new bookers. So, a mailing list sign up, you can't use legitimate interest. You have to use consent for a mailing list sign up because no purchase is being made. You can only use the soft opt-in if they're in the process of they've bought something from you. So for your mailing list sign-ups, you're still going to have to use consent, but ticket buyers at the point of sale, you can use the soft opt-in. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. In order to use legitimate interest, you do have to do something called a balancing test, but you do it once, and I'll show you what that means. You do have to have notification at the point of sale. So somebody needs to be, again, it comes back to telling people what you're going to do with their data, being clear. So you have to tell them at that point what you're going to do, and they have to be given the opportunity to say, no, thank you. You must have a privacy policy in place that has that written in it, that that's what you're going to do. And you must include the ability to unsubscribe in all the emails you subsequently send them. But I think most of you are probably using something like MailChimp or whatever, and you can't send an email from MailChimp without that unsubscribe thing being on it anyway. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be difficult. The balancing test is basically a way of saying we need to show that there is a legitimate reason for us as an organisation why we need to do this, why this is good for us. But we have to balance that with the individual rights of the customer. And we have to show that we've taken into consideration how the individual will be impacted. Would they expect you to do this with their data? So Aer Lingus use exactly this model. Okay, so when you're booking a flight, they ask you for your contact details, email address here. And you can see here, they say, tick this box if you do not want to receive marketing emails with our latest offers. So in their case, they are making you tick the box if you don't want to receive marketing emails. So if we're going for the path of least resistance, okay, and people want to whiz through this booking, they're not going to tick that box, and then Aer Lingus can talk to them. Okay, so this is exactly an example of the soft opt-in and legitimate interest. This is not consent. Here's another one from Longcomb. They do it the other way round. Let me just move this because this is annoying me. Hang on, move that up there. So they have pre-ticked this box. Their system, their website has been set to pre-tick this box, which is allowed in this circumstance. And it says, I would like to subscribe to the Longcomb newsletter, receive the latest news. I don't think this is a particularly great example because it should really say, please untick this box if you would prefer not to receive this. But they're doing it. Now, again, this is linked to a purchase. You can see it's come after the shopping bag. So you can only do this when they're buying something. But if they've got tickets in their basket, they're going through that, you can absolutely use this approach. So I'm going to give you an example from a point of sale website for an arts organisation. So the sort of thing you could say is, from time to time, we will send you information by email or post. Now, if that was consent, you'd have to ask them separately about similar events and ticket offers. You may not do ticket offers, so it might just say similar events, or to ask your opinion via occasional customer surveys. Now, as I said earlier, you can use performance of a contract for that. It's up to you. But if you decide you're not comfortable with that and you want to do it this way, you can put that in there. And then we've put in here, you will need to repeat this step each time you book to remain opted out, but you can unsubscribe at any time. So this would be asked every time they book a ticket. And then it says, we may also send you information about our charitable activities by post. Unfortunately, the EU GDPR does not allow you to send fundraising communications to somebody who's booked a ticket because it's not similar goods and services. So you can't send emails about supporting our work to people who've booked a ticket. You could, if they'd also made a donation at the point of sale, you could absolutely then do that by email. But if they're all they've done is book a ticket, you can do it by post, but you can't do it by email. So, and if you don't do much fundraising, you might just remove that bit I've highlighted. And then it says, if you would prefer not to receive these, please untick the boxes below. There is a link through that word here to our privacy policy. So if somebody wants to go, oh, that's a bit odd, I'm not usually asked to do it like this, they could go and read your privacy policy and that should say very clearly how it's done. And then they untick the boxes. So you've pre-ticked email, you've pre-ticked post. And they would just untick what they don't want. And of course, as we know, path of least resistance, these are already pre-ticked. So they'll probably just go, oh yeah, that's fine, and skip over. What do you do with in terms of communicating with people who are at the desk or on the phone? So this is one of the questions we got asked, and I came up with this data promise, and I'll show you what I do with this. So you come up with rather than here's our, I mean, you need a privacy policy, but on the counter at the box office, I would have something like this, kind of going, here's what we promised to do. Or something like this, it's up to you, we're going to do this. Simply tell us when you book your tickets if you'd rather we didn't do that. Something like this. And I would put this in a little folder thing, little Perspex holder on the desk in the box office. So then when somebody comes, you could say, oh, while I'm processing your tickets, could you just have a read of that while I'm just sorting this out? And then you say to them, is that all okay? And they go, yes, that's fine. Or no, I'd rather you didn't. And then you can deal with it on the box office. You could also use the same wording in a pre-recorded telephone message before they get through to you. So then you're not wasting time asking them lots of questions. That could be pre-recorded message. They get through. Oh, did you hear the message before you booked your tickets? Is that all right? What would you like to do? You can honour that, and then you know that everybody's been asked or told and given the opportunity to opt out. I've given you a draft telephone script for that recorded message, so you could adapt that. So there's what the box office operator might say. So that's a lot quicker than going, oh, can I just take you through the privacy policy and all that nonsense? Okay. So that's how that all works. Now, I should say on the Performing Arts Forum website, there are lots of resources, and I'll let Irma talk about that at the end. But basically, I've pre-written the balancing test. I've got an example privacy policy that you can nick and change. There's all these wordings are all available for you to use, repurpose, whatever you want. So we've done as much of it as we can for you. So you just need to kind of have a look at it, adapt it to what you need, and hopefully there isn't as much legwork as there might be. Then the other bit that we need to cover is sharing data with third parties. So if you want to share that customer data with anybody else that is not, I don't mean within the organisation, I mean outside the organisation, you have to use consent, unless it's as part of the performance of a contract. So if, for example, you've outsourced your bars and catering and somebody's bought a package which includes a bottle of champagne, you can give the caterers the name of the person and where they're sitting so they know that they can fulfill that order. That's performance of a contract. But in terms of sharing data that could be used, particularly for marketing, you can't share the data that you've gathered through the legitimate interest soft opt-in with another organisation. So if you're a venue selling tickets for a festival, it means you can't share that information with the festival under those rules. And it's worth thinking about what a third party is, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Basically, only the data controller is allowed to use that data. Okay, if you wanted to pass it to somebody else, you would have to get the consent of the customer to do that. So this is where we get into real difficulties with venues and touring companies and festivals if venues are doing the ticketing, because legally they're not allowed to share that data unless somebody's been asked for consent. So there are various ways of thinking about this. So one way of doing it is a ticket agent model. So a venue could act as a ticket agent for a festival, and in that case, the festival could be the data controller and not the venue. Um, but if you were going to do that, the venue would have to be really clear to the customer at the point of sale that the festival is the data controller, and then they'd need to operate those questions, those soft opt-in questions on behalf of the festival. And the venue, crucially, couldn't then use that data for their own marketing. It would belong to the festival. So there's various different ways, scenarios, which I imagine some people on the call are using different ways. So if the festival sells its own tickets through its own box office, the festival is the data controller. The festival can use the data, the venue can't, unless a third party question is added, which I'll show you in a minute. If the venue is selling for the festival as a ticket agent, the festival is the data controller. So again, the festival can use the data, the venue can't. If the venue is just selling the festival tickets under its own website and nothing has changed, they can't give that data to the festival and the venue can use that data. Okay, so my little pink asterisks on here say, unless a third party consent question is added. And here is the third party consent question. So this is the other alternative. So there's what we saw earlier. So you're asking all of that. Then you add in a further question, which isn't pre-ticked, which says, the event you have booked for is part of the such and such arts festival. If you would like to receive information from the festival about their events and activities by email, because we have to say how, please tick this box. And then you could give the festival the data for anybody who ticks that box. In reality, my estimate is about 1 in 10 people do. So it's not great, but it's better than nothing. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing there. Have I just bamboozled everybody with that? Is it worth handing over to Ticket Soul first to see if they can show a little bit of that? Or is everybody so bamboozled we need to stop there, Irma, first?
I think we could definitely bring in TicketSolve now. And just in terms of the resources that you mentioned, what we'll do at the end of this is we'll pull together Katie's presentation from today, all the other bits and pieces that we had from before, and put them all in one place. And we'll send you all that afterwards. So, yeah, I think we could
Okay.
hand it to Dean if he's ready to go.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me all right, guys. That's all good. Yeah, great stuff. Cool stuff. Listen, thanks, Irma, Katie, Eileen, as ever, for having me. Yeah, I won't take up too much of your time anyways. It'll be about 3 or 5 minutes, but just to kind of go through, I suppose, some of the practical things with what Katie has kind of explained there. So in relation to auto opt-ins, it's just a setting on TicketSolve, just something that you can enable. Obviously, helps to have, your privacy policies, any terms and conditions you want to iron out, and then have them ready to be hyperlinked within the box itself, kind of before you set that up. But it's essentially just setting up a setting on TicketSolve that we can just enable or disable for you. And obviously, just reach out to support if you need to kind of get the ball rolling on that. But I'll just show you a few examples practically on TicketSolve, what it looks like, and all the rest of it. To organizations that have kind of been, I suppose, the trailblazers for auto opt-ins within kind of the TicketSolve universe on the island of Ireland were the Mermaid Art Centre in Bray, and then the Unthawn, the Art Centre in Dundalk as well. So they've been doing this for a while as well, and they've really reaped the benefits. And yeah, they've just seen, kind of as Katie's outlined as well, their marketing numbers really kind of go up astronomically as well, just from adding that extra bit of friction. So I might try and share my screen. I might have permission here, hopefully. I should be able to show you what I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see that, folks. But I'm just going to pick up a ticket for our colleagues and friends here in the Mermaid. And I'm just going to confirm the selection here. Go full price, add to cart. And I'm just going to go to checkout here, continue. donation page as well here. Continue. And I'm just going to continue as guest in this instance, basically assigning myself as a fresh customer. And you can see at the very, very bottom here, this is kind of the pre-ticked box that Katie's been talking about here, where it's, all of the kind of information is there. Essentially, that's what's called a snippet on Ticketsolve. Again, we can edit this text to whatever you want it to say for your specific venue. You can see here as well that there's a hyperlink to the privacy policy for the mermaid in there as well. So really super useful and very customizable as well. And they really just have it down pat, really. And you can see the extra bits and pieces here as well that are optional. These are called permissions within Ticketsolve. And essentially what permissions are just extra bits of tick box exercise, kind of like what Katie was talking about for the festival options as well, just in case you want to add an extra one to those two as well. Just, I suppose, in relation to kind of festivals and potentially selling for them and all that as well. If you have any, I suppose, festivals or smaller organizations that might want to sell through your Ticketsolve account, what we can do is set up what's called a subdomain within your account. Some of our venues probably have subdomains already or have what are called on-sale subdomains within Ticketsolve. These are kind of very, very handy ways to redirect traffic for your busy on sale so it doesn't disrupt any kind of regular traffic to your regular site or your venue. But what subdomains are they're essentially sub pages within Ticketsolve that you can call whatever, and they'll have their own unique URL. So, for instance, for Hawkswell, for instance, they do a festival called Sligo Live. I believe they also do a festival called Corja as well. And those are separate URLs. They can be styled differently. And essentially, they're another sub page that you can divert traffic away from your own website while still selling the tickets through the same Ticketsolve account. So it's really useful, super customizable. If you want to get in touch with support and want to pursue that as well, you're absolutely more than welcome to do so. We can guide you through it as well. Especially with the around the branding and the look and feel and setting things up in that way. But just to touch again what Katie said as well, you can add specific terms and conditions. You can add specific permissions, those kind of tick boxes, bits of friction to subdomains that will only appear on those specific pages. So there's a bit of customization there as well. Yeah, again, if there's any festivals or any, I suppose, third party smaller organizations or festivals that you'd be interested in your Ticketsolve accounts and selling on behalf of them and collecting that information via a checkbox as well, that's absolutely achievable through subdomains as well. But yeah, obviously, if you're interested in any of that and you want to contact the support team, and pursue, subdomains, this email opt-in as well. We also have this really good article we've written up as well that I might pop in the chat here while I'm finished talking, just about how you set it up, and obviously just a little bit of a walkthrough as to how to do that too. So if anybody's interested, obviously feel free to contact me, contact support during the regular channels, and it's very, very simple. I'm very, very surprised that more people in Ireland are doing it in Ticketsolve, to be honest with you, because, for instance, just the Mermaid and Lanthan, they've really, really seen and reaped the benefits of just having that extra bit of friction on their marketing email pages. So if anybody wants to get the ball rolling on this in any meaningful way, just feel free to reach out to Ticketsolve in the normal way and we can get stuff working for you. Thanks very much, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dean. And I should just say, Ticketsolve have been absolutely brilliant in this. When we first identified this as a kind of issue, was it about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, Irma? We kind of went, this is absolutely something that we need to do something about. And they've been so supportive and developed lots of resources as well that you on their website that you can read. So if you've got the stuff on the Performing Arts website and the stuff on the Ticketsolve website, really, and now some people that have done it, and they've had no customer complaints, I don't think. I haven't heard, everybody is not screaming and shouting. So I think, the risk hopefully has been taken out of it for everybody.
There's a question in the chat, and it's actually in my head as well. Basically, thanking everyone for the presentations and then saying, just for the avoidance of doubt, if a venue is selling for a festival as a ticket agent, then an opt-in must be requested. Is that correct?
If you're doing it through the subdomains of Ticketsolve, so it's very clear that the festival is the one that's selling the tickets, it's just the venue is processing them, then the festival is the data controller, not the venue, and you could use the soft opt-in. You could use the pre-ticked soft opt-in box for the festival on
So
that basis.
they'll be able to access their customers afterwards. They'll be
Yeah.
able to, yeah.
Yeah. But if it's selling as a venue, if the venue is selling as a venue, in just as it's selling festival events alongside all its other things, just normally, and isn't saying, this separate domain, then you would need a separate consent box to pass that data to the festival.
Okay, that's clear. Has anyone else got any questions? What I will do is I will probably end the recording here, if that makes sense. And then if people have further questions, we're really happy to stay on for a few minutes and answer them. I'm actually gonna, but I'm gonna, for the purpose of the recording, it's gonna end here. So.